morning again. Hey, we are privileged. We are privileged. We also our government doesn't recognize that.
That's what I do.
And afterwards, we'll have the deacons in the back. We'll take a special offering. I know whenever we talk about money, no one likes to hear that, right?
I know.
Don't think of it as money. Think of supply and provisions for missionaries to get out in the field. I prefer it that way. It looks. So I've been praying about it. You've been praying about it. You don't want to talk about it.
No.
You don't have to say anything.
All right.
I'll be quiet. You got the floor.
Just a signal. All right. Very good. Oh, you must have a tall pastor. I may stand here most of the time. Was this measured to your height? Is this what made for you? Yeah, that was very nice. So happy to be with you. My name is Mark Schuler. My wife is Allison. She'll come up in just a minute. Remind me. And we're from north central Illinois, so up LaSalle, Peru area. I don't know. Some of you might travel up that way. I've come down here a few times. But we're missionaries to Myanmar. My wife and I have been there. I've been there 3 years. She was there 1 year. And then we're coming back to the States to raise support and then go back out again. We're looking at a lifetime of service in Myanmar as long as the Lord keeps us able to go back there. In Myanmar, it's a sensitive country, so we're never quite sure what's going to happen from day to day, from week to week, to month, to year. It's a little bit unstable. So we're trusting that God's going to keep us there and work there, but there's always a possibility that something happens and the country closes and all Westerners are shipped out. Because it's happened before, about 30 years ago. There's been about a 30-year period where there was really no missionaries in Myanmar because the government just kicked them all out and really closed off the country to a lot of the Western world, and not too many people were allowed to go and visit it, grant visas. In the last 5-10 years, those restrictions have kind of loosened, and we're going back in the country, but we can't tell them that we're missionaries, and we can't be openly missions. So we have to go in there as business people, basically, and we're going to talk to them more about that. Before we do that, I'll have my wife come up, and she's going to tell you a little bit about her calling. And I grew up in the church. I don't know who here grew up in the church. Not this one, but any church. Yeah? Yeah. All right, yeah. So I grew up in the church and didn't really feel a call to ministry, but God started pushing me towards that way after I was graduated from high school. Went to college where there was a lot of missions focus and kind of got sucked into that whirlpool. And so, but it was God. It wasn't just trendy. Yeah, so that's kind of my story, and I've been excited about going to Myanmar for the last 10 years. Actually, it's been like 13 now. And then I met Allison while I was on the way, and while I was planning to go to Myanmar. And she'll tell you a little bit more about her story.
Is this one okay to use? Okay, great. Am I just too quiet? Okay, I'm just being too quiet. So Mark grew up in a church that had a lot of missionaries coming through, and you would see people who are not pastors, but dedicated to doing missions kind of stuff. I grew up in a Catholic church, and we didn't have that. So after going to Catholic school for many years, it comes a point where you realize it's true. If everything I believe is true, I have to do something with this. As a 13-year-old girl in a Catholic church, what can you actually do? And there wasn't really a clear, defined path or any options in that. So I went to college. I decided that being a journalist was a good way to make a good impression on the world. Possibly, the best thing I could do would be go someplace like Burma or Korea or North Korea, where bad things are happening and people here don't really know what's going on, but people who live there don't have much power in their life to do anything about their government. So go there, find some stories, bring them back here, tell people the truth that people here need to know to make life better for people over there so they can change things. So I did that for about 7 years and met Mark. And as we were talking, it started to bring up those memories from when I was younger about there's something more important than what I'm doing. And we talked about missionaries, what Mark was preparing to do in Burma, and the things that are so important to both missionaries and journalists, and that's the love of the truth and the importance of sharing the truth. It was this great conversation that was like everything I'd been thinking was just sort of translated backwards, that it isn't we need to go there and find out what the truth is there and bring it back here. We have an amazing truth that we've been blessed to know our whole lives growing up in churches here, that people there just have no access to, and there's no one to tell them. And we can take the truth that we know and share it with them and change their lives in a much more important way than I could as a reporter. So that's what we do, yeah. And as Mark mentioned, he'll talk more about it, but as Mark mentioned, it is a sensitive country, and the Assemblies of God Fellowship has 2,000 some missionaries in more than 200 countries and territories around the world. And we talk about sensitive countries. Sometimes it's places like the Middle East where it's really dangerous, life-threatening to be a missionary. Fortunately, Burma's not like that. We're not likely to get killed because we're Christians there. It is possible that we could get kicked out, sent home, not allowed to come back. It would be the end of our ministry, and that'd be really, really disappointing. So, so while we want to keep in touch with everybody that we meet and let you guys know what's happening while we're over there, there are really two ways that we can do that safely and keep our ministry safe, and that's through a secret Facebook group that nobody knows about unless you're in it. But if you sign up for a newsletter and give us your email, we can add that to it, or add you to the group, and we'll also send you our newsletter. It's only 4 times a year. It's not a lot of things to read, just to keep you updated on what's happening, and thank you for your prayers, and yeah, let you know what's going on over there. Is there anything I'm missing?
No, you're doing great, baby.
Thank you very much for letting us join you today.
Oh, we have a baby. Eventually, actually, when we were planning to come here, I think we were talking about next week coming here, and then I was like, well, that's a little bit close because, yeah, could pop at any moment. So yeah, so we're about 2 weeks away. That's what our midwife says. So we'll see if we get 2 weeks out of that stuff. But yeah, very excited to be here. Very, very thankful. Actually, can we get the slide going here? The first slide would be great. I know that you are streaming this, and that's fine because there's probably not too many Myanmar military officials that are looking for church services on the website or on the internet. But if you want to leave it up there, don't put anything connected with our names on it, that'd be all right, because if people do Google searches, we don't want them to see it, whether we're obviously missionaries. But the internet's so broad, it's not going to find us. So thank you so much. Yes, okay, so the first slide there, Burma, Myanmar. The name, there's 2 names for it, and there's all sorts of reasons for why there are 2 different names, and depending on what you believe politically about that area of the world, I don't know if any of you guys have very strong feelings towards the way what the country should be named, but they do. So basically, the short answer is that there's 2 names right now, and because of the political situation being up in the air, we still kind of are using 2 names. So Burma, Myanmar, even as I'm talking today, I will probably end up using both of both Burma and Myanmar. So know that it's the same country, same people, same area, just 2 different names. Okay? Is it easy? All right, Burma, Myanmar. All right. So usually I say that people over 40 know it as Myanmar or know it as Burma, and then people younger than 40 don't really know it at all because it just hasn't been really in the news much. So I mean, if you're like a political guru and you're looking at like all these third world countries and what's happening politically, I haven't met too many people like that, but there are some people that are familiar with what's going on there. But you will be more familiar today, so thank you. If I can get the next slide. There it is. All right, so if you look at just the world map there, obviously United States is on our left side of the map here, and then Myanmar is going to be right here. Easiest way to find it is right between India and China, okay? India and China, just right down there, Myanmar, okay? If I can get the next slide, that'd be good. Now, when I first started hearing about Myanmar, I heard about it from a college student. He was a friend of mine while I was in university, and we were he just come over, so we both arrived kind of at the same time, and we were on the same dormitory floor, and we became good friends. And then later on, we were rooming together, and the one thing that he would talk a lot about is just the oppressive military government they have. It's not a straight-up dictatorship. It's not communist. It's kind of like this, basically, they call it a military junta, or it's just a military government. Basically, they declared martial law and haven't undeclared it. There's about a handful of generals that kind of just rule everything and do everything the way they think it should be done. And so with that, you have a lot of abuse of their power. There's a lot of human rights violations. There's a lot of poverty. The country's lived for about 30 years underneath the military government, and it has not done well. They closed off the borders. I don't know if you remember, in 2008, there was a huge cyclone that hit Myanmar, Burma, and just devastating. People were dying because they didn't have clean water and food. I mean, it was just terrible. And there was human rights, not human rights, aid that from America and other places that were trying to send aid to the country, and it was sitting on the docks and at the airports, but the military government would not let the aid come in. They didn't want the Western world to see what was going on in Myanmar, and even though there was all this aid just ready to save people's lives, they wouldn't let the aid come in. And so this is the kind of things that they've suffered under for a long time. And when we were there, we were able to see it firsthand, and it's lightened up a little bit, but not much. So this is what, if you look at websites about Myanmar, you're going to see a lot about this, and you're going to see a lot of political movements and a lot of people talking about how the government's bad and they just need to, let the people vote and vote in some really great people, and that's kind of what I was thinking when I first went over there. And but the longer I was there, I really see the government structure as a symptom of a much larger problem. And this is just what happens when you have a dysfunctional society in general. And the reason why they have a dysfunctional society, it's not because they're not smart, they're not wonderful, loving people. Really, it's because they have a Buddhist heritage. If you want to give me the next slide. The country is 89% Buddhist. And we say 40 million unreached people. So that's talking about people that just have no access to the gospel. We're not talking about people that are not saved or not Christian. We're talking about people who don't know another Christian, who probably have never seen a Bible and don't really know about the concept of God. So we got about 40 million of those people inside Myanmar. And the Buddhism, it seems like they claim that it goes back to really the start of Buddhism. I don't really know how accurate that is, but they say it goes back about 2,500 years. And that is a real stronghold, and it's something that makes our work very difficult because they really see themselves as connected to the start of Buddhism, and they don't convert easily because they don't really have a lot of national pride. They don't have a lot to be proud of in their country right now, and haven't for at least 200 years. But the one thing that they do have to be proud of is their Buddhist heritage, and so that's a major stumbling block to get over, to convert to Christianity. But again, I see how Buddhism is affecting absolutely everything in the country, and it's not like you could just give them a democratic government and they would just be fine. Really, this government they have is a product of their culture, and their culture is steeped in Buddhism. If you want to give me the next slide. Now, I don't know about, excuse me, I'm sorry, Mattoon, but you probably don't know a lot of Buddhists. There's probably not a Buddhist temple. I don't know. Has anybody actually met a Buddhist before? One? All right, very good. and we don't really have an idea of Buddhism in America because it's just not around us, and we kind of think of it as nice ideas. And I'm not talking about America in general, not talking about you, church. I'm talking about just America in general. That we kind of see it as something that's, well, they don't bomb us. They seem to be kind of keeping themselves and doing nice things. Prayer and meditation and non-violent type things, and we're fine with that. Just keep on doing that because we have problems with other types of people. But so really, when you talk about Buddhism, I have a hard time with talking to people about really the evils of Buddhism, because people see it as kind of a nice, peaceful type thing. How can you be angry at people that just want to sit around and meditate? And this is kind of the picture that we have, and in our fast-paced world, we kind of think that's kind of a nice idea, maybe a slower, different type of thinking. So, but really, if you want to give me the next slide, if you go to the heart of Buddhism, and this is where I really think that this is the kind of the source of their problems. At the heart of Buddhism, I don't know. Like I said, I didn't really know anything about Buddhism until I went over there, so I'm not going to assume that you guys know. So if you guys have studied this, please, I'm sorry. But at the heart of Buddhism, you have reincarnation, and if you know anything about world religions, really that's Hinduism, which would be in India, and then the Buddhist world. They also have those are the two major religions that really look to reincarnation as kind of the major idea. And so Buddhism kind of came out of Hinduism, so they're similar in that way. But this idea of reincarnation is basically you die and are reborn, and the cycle of life just keeps on continuing. And so everything in the universe has always existed, and your essence is just transferred from one body to the next body after you die. And this is kind of their idea. And again, to the Western eyes, that sounds harmless, and that's fine. just don't bother anyone. But it really creates a lot of problems because you guys have probably heard about karma. Karma is more of a similar, it's a term that we've heard before. They don't use that word karma, but I find that most Western people are familiar with the idea of karma. Does anybody know about karma? Basically, the bad that you do kind of comes back to you. The good that you do kind of comes back to you. If you're generally a good person, you'll have good things, good fortune will happen to you. And if you do bad things will return to you. And mostly that's talking about in your life right now, and then how you'll be repaid in your next life. So some people talk about it in your own life. I do something nice for my neighbor later on does something nice for me. That's also in the idea, but mostly it's talking about once you die, all the good that you've done and all the bad that you've done, like that comes back to you in the next life. So you die and you were a very good person. You might be born in a rich society with a very affluential family, and you might do very well just from the starting point. But if you're a very bad person, you might be born with a disability. You might be born in a lower ethnic group in a poor neighborhood. Or you might, anything that would be considered a bad lot in life, that's what you'll probably come back as. And even as low as animals, dogs, grasshoppers, crickets, you can be reborn as these things. And the Buddhists have it all worked out. There's a bunch of scales, and this is higher than that. And interestingly enough, men are higher than women, so I don't know about that. Anyway. But here's where it breaks down. Here's where it creates problems in their society. Is that kind of like, are you guys familiar with the caste system in India? Okay, so I got some nods there. That kind of, there's these blocks of culture, blocks of people groups, and the one people group is the influential people. One is like the bankers, one's the merchants, one's the poorest people, one of the people that are untouchable, and they're kind of in that lot. And that's kind of the idea what happens in Buddhism too, is that if you're born into a bad situation, it must be because you did something really terrible in the life before. And if you're born into a good situation, it's because you did something really good. Maybe you were a revered monk or something like that. And so, how that differs from Christianity is huge, because, and let me just use this as an example to kind of see how it works its way into society. If you see somebody on the side of the road and who's got a sign or whatever, it's homeless, and you think, okay, well, I've been blessed, I've got a lot of stuff, I feel like I should help this person out. And so you do whatever you do, you give them money, you give them a bag of groceries, whatever you do, and you try to help them out. I think for most of us, our motivation is to really help the person and get them up on their feet. You want to help them get a job. You want to help them to be a part of the community again and do all right without the need of aid. So we have the person's best interest in mind. We want to help them out of their situation. Now in Myanmar, they don't do that, because if you are born into a bad situation, if you are very poor, you have a disability, it's because you've done something very bad. You must have been a murderer. You must have done something really terrible. So that person needs to suffer for his or her entire life, so that they can be reborn in the next life at a better lot. So when somebody gives money on the street to a beggar, it's not so that they can get out of their situation. It's so that they can keep them in their situation. They prolong their suffering as long as they can, so that when they die, they can be reborn in a better state. So somebody who is in power, that has the control, has the money, has the influence, doesn't think it's wrong to oppress those underneath, because they've already done something terrible. And it's right that they suffer during this lifetime. So they don't want to help. And in Myanmar, there's so many different ethnic groups. We don't really have an idea that they have these different ethnic groups, and some of them are kind of on that lower totem pole. They're seen as mountain people and uneducated, and those people are usually the ones that have the short end of the stick in Myanmar. And then there's another group which we want to minister, which is usually on the higher end of the totem pole in Myanmar, and we'll tell you more about them. But again, this idea of reincarnation, the Buddhism is really the poison that's hurting a wonderful land with wonderful people. So anyway, there it is. Can I have the next slide, please? So the Burmese, this is the ethnic group. In Myanmar, there's 130 ethnic groups or something like that. So these are just different. We don't really use the word tribes, but some people kind of understand it more in a tribal area, that they have the same family name, and they kind of associate with that group of people, rather than we're kind of all Americans. I mean, there's like these segmented parts of society, but we're all Americans. We look a little bit different, but we're all kind of in the same group. But that not so in Myanmar. These groups stay very separate, and they know who they are, and they know who to go to, and that's kind of how it works. So in Myanmar, there's one group in particular, which is the largest ethnic group. It's the national language. They have the national language, and so this is probably the most influential group, because of just their size, and then their particular control in the government at this point. But the Burmese, there's about 27 million people with only 10,000 Christians. And those are just numbers until you kind of break it down. What is 27 million? What is 10,000? You give me the next slide here. 27 million people is more than twice the population of Illinois, okay? And 10,000 Christians, how many people are there in Mattoon? 18,000, 20,000, something like that? So that'd be half the population of Mattoon, with the entire, and this is just one ethnic group. This is not all of Myanmar. This is just one ethnic group. So this is a real struggle, because if there's one thing that I know about Christianity, is that the gospel travels fastest when there's some sort of similarity between the person who is saved and the person that they're trying to witness to. And this is really difficult, because the Burmese are kind of in control, and they don't see the the ethnic minorities who are Christian, they don't have a whole lot of influence. It's a very difficult situation. So only 10,000 Christians. And if any of you guys are missionary history buffs, Adoniram Judson would be the first Baptist missionary, actually the first U.S. missionary, went to Myanmar. So this is 200 years. We've had 200 years of a few Christians and a translated Bible, and still only 10,000 Christians in this particular ethnic group. And so it's a really, really difficult situation, and we're working hard to see what's the stumbling blocks. Why haven't more of these people come to Christianity? And we know some obvious things like they're Buddhist and their family are a big issue, and I'll talk more about that. But anyway, we're working hard to see what are the stumbling blocks and what's the problem here. Why isn't the gospel spreading like it did in Acts? Okay, the next slide, please. These are some of the things that we're using right now. Like I said, we've only been in the country about 5 years, so we're really trying to learn what we need to do and what's effective and what's working. We have a coffee house ministry, and basically this gives us a business cover. We can go in there and pretend like we're entrepreneurs and we're starting an American-style coffee house, and people come in and they practice English with us. So a lot of people don't know this, but English is very popular in Asia, and so people are interested in learning English, and so they come in and we practice English with them. And so that's kind of the draw. People that are outside the Christian community have this place where they can come and meet a Christian, us, and we can talk about our lives and talk about our testimony. And we've had people come to know God through the coffee house ministry. And so it's very, very practical for us right now, but then also very beneficial to us. So, if we give me the next slide. We also do Bible school training. There's a small Bible college in our city that we teach English at. There's not a whole lot of resources in Burmese. They don't really have curriculum in Burmese, so all their curriculum as of this point is in English. So if you want to go to Bible school, you got to know English. So it's not the way we want it, but it's the way it is right now, and we're working on translating curriculum into Burmese so that they don't have to learn English. Take that step away. But right now, all the curriculum is in English, and so we basically teach English so that they can understand their textbooks, really work with ministries. And then we also want to be connected with the local church and with the local ministers. And so we figure building relationships in the Bible school right now is probably one of the best things that we can do right now, to just build relationships with the local church. If you give me the next slide. One-on-one ministry, of course, we just do personal evangelism where we are. This is a Christmas party in our home. This is some of our neighbors and people that we've met, and using Christian holidays and things like that to talk about God's love. And we, of course, we did like the Christmas story, sang Christmas hymns, carols. We call them carols, and and again, just shine our light in the community where we live. So that's another one thing that we do. And the next one is support the local church, and whatever the local church is doing, we want to be a part of that and support them. This is an outreach to a poor neighborhood. These kids don't have their parents don't have enough money for them to go to school, and so the church does just basic education like 3 times a week, so just the kids might know how to learn to read and write. And so this is something that our church has done, and so we would join them this day. And so basically whatever the church is doing, we want to be a part of that and support that, and help to resource them as well. So that's another thing that we do. So that's kind of our missions focus right now. If I come back in 5 or 6 years, it might have all changed because the country changes really fast. But this is what we're working on right now, and so there it is. So if I can get the next slide here, I'll tell you quickly about 2 people actually. Ong Jaw would be the first one, and the other one is a friend of mine named Gimpy. Ong Jaw was my next door neighbor, and he when I moved into his apartment building, his mother wanted me to teach him English. He already knew a lot of English, but he wanted me to teach him English. So his mother would just send him upstairs to my apartment all the time. And so after school and summer times and things like that, I wasn't a babysitter because they don't need babysitters there. The babies just play wherever they want. but but it was just he didn't have, his sisters were away in Singapore, and so it was basically he didn't have anybody to play with, and then I'm the Westerner, the only Westerner in the building, and so I was the friend to Ongja. So we just started hanging out and just doing all sorts of things. If you give me the next slide there. So here's some of the things that we're doing. We're working on a project. I used to build things with wood in Myanmar because the furniture there is just terrible. And here we are on our roof doing the Coke and Mentos thing, doing the science experiments. And this is they have a water festival where everybody just throws water on each other. And so there's Ongja and I. That's actually when we first just met. I probably knew him only about a month at that point. But we just started living life together, doing all sorts of things together. And as we got to know each other, he was up in my apartment one day, and we were just talking about things, going to the pagoda, and he wanted me to go to the pagoda. That's the big thing where people worship Buddha and things like that. And I've been there, but I didn't want to go there with him because I'd have to look sad while he was looking happy, and I couldn't do that. So he was trying to figure out why I wouldn't go to the pagoda. And he's like 7 years old, 6 years old at that point. And I was like, well, God doesn't want me to go to the pagoda. And that just did not help him at all, because he really didn't have a concept of God at all. So I know that in America we have a lot of people that have been in church and have maybe been hurt by the church or feel like God has abandoned them. And we feel like our job is to kind of fix their view of God. They already kind of have this concept of God, but they kind of have a bad concept on it. And we need to kind of just write it and fix it. We kind of figure out what the problems is and try to fix that. In Myanmar, it's not that. You just have to start from nothing and just to give them the concept of God. I mean, Jesus, forget it. Just start with God. It's quite difficult. So I was kind of at a loss. I'm like, how do you start from nothing? You just start listing things like, well, God is love, God is good, God helps you, you can pray to Him. I mean, it's just like, I don't know, like, where do you start? What I eventually did is we got a Bible. You do the next slide here. A picture Bible, and we just started telling him the stories of the Bible with the picture Bible, and we just started telling him, stories of creation, Abraham. We just started in the beginning and just talked about the flood and all sorts of things. And through that, he got to know about God. So, and later on, I learned, that's kind of how I learned about God too. So it makes sense that these stories, these are huge, and you're going to find people in your community that aren't familiar with these stories. And definitely when they come here, these are great. I mean, this is kid-friendly stuff. And he would remember them, and he would look through the Bible, find something, and tell me about this, and we'd tell him the story of that. And so this went on for about 2 years. We did other things. I mean, we just lived life together. But as we were getting ready to leave, it was probably about a month before we left. Ongja was just sitting on the bed right there. It's not a bed; it's kind of a couch thing. And he said, I think I want to be a Christian. And that was out of the blue, because I didn't ask him about that. I wasn't trying to get him to say a prayer. I wasn't trying to figure out what I was doing. But I think he saw the love in our home, and he heard the stories of God, and something that was in his life, or that was not in his life when he went downstairs, was in his life when he was upstairs. And we didn't pray at that moment. We've been very cautious, because we know if God's working on his heart, then that's all that matters. I don't need to put wedges in between him and his family right now. But I believe that God is working on his heart. And but this is the state that we find. I mean, I think about Ongja in 2 years of telling the story of God, and these are the people that I see all the time in Myanmar. The first time I was there, I was just overwhelmed at how many people it's going to take somebody sitting with them for 2 years before they can really understand the concept of God and understand their sin. And God does things very quickly sometimes, but it seems like it does take a long time for a lot of people. And Ongja is a special case because we don't see this happen very often. But there's just so many people, and there's only a few of us missionaries. Inside the Assemblies of God, there's only about 5 of us right now. Once everybody gets out there, it's going to be more like 10 missionaries. There's some missionaries from other denominations we know there, but not near enough. So we're looking for people, so just so you know, if you're interested. I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. So the next person I want to tell you about, and I do have a sermon, so I'm going to try to do this really fast, is Gimpy. Gimpy is a Christian. He's from a minority ethnic group that is predominantly Christian. And I got to know each other, got to know him through my church, and we just started to hang out. And I was his English teacher for a little while, and he and I are still good friends. In Bible school right now, looking forward to going out to church plant. It's just kind of rare, actually. So if you give me the next slide, he's passionate. He wants people to know God. He's found God, and he wants people to know. Here he is. Studying, we had to bring in some Christian literature from somebody donated it, and we brought him in through airplane in our luggage, and he found them on our floor, and he was just going through all the books, and I mean, really hungry for anything that he get his hands on to understand. We just have so much information. Every time I come back here, it's so much information. I have piles of books that I know that I'll never read. There, it's not that way. Anyway, so he's looking right now at a Vine's Concordance, I believe, and he was just so excited. And he's like, "Will you bring me back one of these?" And I was like, "Okay, I can do that." But he's really passionate about ministering, but then also knowing about God, because they had missionaries come in and preach, and right now it sounds like they're still preaching the same sermons that they heard the missionary preach. There hasn't been a whole lot of growth since the missionaries left about 30 years ago, and so they're very hungry for more information, and we have so much available to us in English. It's crazy. If you give me the next slide. But here's Gimpy. He came over to our house. He was staying with us for about 2 weeks, and he would tell stories to Ongja in Burmese, which I was really thrilled, because I was afraid that he's going to see Christianity as a Western thing if he's hearing about it in English, and this is how God works in the West. But through Gimpy, he was able to tell stories about in the Burmese language, and show him movies in Burmese that they'd done. They dubbed like Christian movies and things like that into Burmese. And so he can see that it's something that is possible for him, and it's not just because I have white skin, this is my thing, and because you have darker skin that you've got to go to the pagoda. And so this is really our goal, because we can't do it. We can't do it. There's too many of them, and there's not enough of us. And even if we get 100 new missionaries a year, there's just too much, and we don't want to be there forever. We don't want to be always holding their hand. We want the church to be able to stand on its own. Indigenous church principles, churches that are self-governing, self-propagating, self-supporting. And so a lot of our work is working with the nationals and really empowering them, because they do lack resources. They do lack just basic training. And so, not that we have all the answers, but we want to work alongside them and work with them. And so we want to see more of this. We want to help the Burmese, or the Christians that are there, reach their own people. Not because we don't want to do the work, it's because there's just not enough of us to do the work. So yeah, so this is our goal, and this is our plan, is to kind of bring these together. We have a man that's in a minority ethnic group with a boy who's in the higher ethnic group, and seeing that there's really no difference, and I can be a Christian. So that's what we want. If you're going to give me the next slide. If you would like to join our team, we're really looking for a team in the United States to kind of help us, not just financially, but to help us with itineration. There's lots of needs that we have, us and our team, when we come back to the States. So if you're interested and you're wondering, I got a job, I got 4 kids, I can't really be part of missions. You can be part of missions, and more than just supporting financially. There's lots of things that we could use help with on this side of the ocean. And so if you're interested, you're like, I feel like I need to do more for missions. You could come to talk to us, and we'll talk about just things that you can do to start getting involved in just global evangelism. So I hear somebody's excited, so that's good. All right. All right, I'm going to close with, I'm not going to close, actually. Like, I heard that you guys usually like about a 2-hour sermon, so I'll just say, Pastor said, you'd be very disappointed, you know. And I was like, oh, that's good. That's just like what I'm used to in Myanmar. I'm joking. They get angry, too. It's hot. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, we have a video that's, it's basically just talking about not just Burma specifically, but the whole region of Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific, and this is the group that we're a part of. So maybe if you don't like working at a coffee shop with us, there's all sorts of other opportunities just in Asia Pacific. Lots of things. We work with trafficked women who are stuck in trafficking, and just all sorts of things that we do. Not us personally, but the Assemblies of God as a group, we have a lot of activity in Southeast Asia. So if you want to just show this, and then I'll come back up and give you the word. So, did you have that for me? No, thank you. So yeah, we really like to just talk to you more, and I'm so happy that we have potluck. Please, if you're interested at all in missions, don't leave without talking to us. We really do want to help the church just in general to see outside their walls and outside their country borders, and definitely short-term mission trips. If you ever get a chance to take a short-term mission trip, definitely do that if you can. So just thank you for your help. And I didn't realize what time it is. It's already 11:20, so I'm not quite sure what I should do because Pastor said just don't like it when those missionaries don't preach. So I don't know what to do. But I will. Here's the deal: is that I was praying this week, and this is a message that God had given me maybe months ago, and I wasn't sure last week if I was supposed to give it, and it wasn't that time. And this week I was praying about it, and I was like, is it this week that I'm supposed to do it? And usually I was thinking that it was going to be like a half an hour prayer time before I get an answer, but it was immediate that it's like, no, this is the message for today. So I'm going to go through with it, but I will do it in a very short manner. Oh dear. Okay. If you want to go back to my slides, at the end of my slides, I have the title for my sermon. The title for my sermon is "Remember, You Were Slaves in Egypt." Actually, I have it differently. If you want to give me at the end, it's "You Shall Remember That You Were Slaves in the Land of Egypt." Now, my wife and I have been studying the book of Deuteronomy. Actually, we did Exodus, and then now we just finished Deuteronomy. And this phrase kept on coming up, that you got to remember that you were slaves in Egypt. And it comes up at least 5 times in the book of Deuteronomy. And it just caught my attention as we were studying. I love the Old Testament. I know that people have a hard time getting into it, but I've been studying it probably for the last 3 or 4 years, and it's rocking my world, but it's great. Anyway, so like I said, 5 times in the book of Deuteronomy, you have this command to remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. And so, I don't know, in Deuteronomy, if you're, I don't know if you're familiar with the context of Deuteronomy and what's happening to the children of Israel in Deuteronomy, but basically you have children of Israel come out of Egypt with Moses, right? And they're in the promised land for how many years? Desert. Sorry, not promised land. Sorry, desert. Yeah, usually it turns out to be about 80 years, I believe. And then they go into the promised land. And so the book of Deuteronomy is kind of at the end of that time that they're ending their wilderness time, and they're going into the promised land. So right after Deuteronomy, you have Joshua, and Joshua takes the people into Deuteronomy. So that's what's happening right now. You have people that have been in the wilderness for a long time, but they were in Egypt before that time, and they're not yet in the promised land. So just keep that in your mind as we go. So I'll just go through and give you each place where it says that. So 5 times in the book of Deuteronomy it says that. If you're writing notes, you could write down Deuteronomy 5:15, Deuteronomy 15:15, Deuteronomy 16:12, Deuteronomy 24:18, and Deuteronomy 24:22. Okay, so 15:15 it says, "You shall remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day." Okay, so that's actually in the 10 Commandments. He's got that. Remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. Deuteronomy 15:15, "You shall remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore, I command you this day." Deuteronomy 16:12, "You shall remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and you shall be careful to observe these statutes." Deuteronomy 24:18, "You shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore, I command you to do this." In Deuteronomy 24:22, "You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I command you to do this." Now, just from me reading it, you notice that it's only partial. You don't actually get the full impact of why I should remember that I was a slave in Egypt, or why they should remember that they were slaves in Egypt, because it says, "You should, therefore I command you to do this," and you're like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. But if you read the entire context, and which I did, you'll understand what it was. And I'll go through very quickly and tell you kind of the context of why they need to remember that they were slaves in Egypt. So each time they're told to remember, it is in connection with a commandment. Okay, so God gives a commandment, and then he says, remember, you were slaves in the land of Egypt, so do this. Okay, so there's a commandment, and they're different. Every time he says that, he's got a different thing that they need to do. And then they're also supposed to remember that they were slaves in the land of Egypt. For the sake of time, I'm not going to unpack every verse, but here are the, and you have some wonderful Bible scholars here. I was very impressed with our Sunday school this morning, so if you want to just ask him, I'm sure that he'll tell you more about this. So in 5:15, Deuteronomy 5:15, this is the first time he says, remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. And the first commandment that is given right before this other commandment to remember is to make sure your servants rest on the Sabbath day. So you have rest on the Sabbath day and the Ten Commandments, and then following that, he says, okay, make sure that everybody in your house. So it's not just like the main family or just the father or just the patriarchal person or just the actual family, but everybody in your house. So, your manservant, your maidservant, your dog, your cat, everybody rests on the Sabbath. It doesn't say dog and cat, but you understand. But the whole household, you can't just have your servants running around doing the work. They have to rest as well, okay? And you're also supposed to remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. And in verse 15, or I'm sorry, chapter 15, verse 15, it's talking about when you release a slave, you must give him things so he can start a new life. So God gives the structure for how slavery would work in the promised land. And he says, okay, when it's time, the year of Jubilee comes and it's time to release your slaves, you can't just say, goodbye, well, have a nice life. You have to give him things. You have to give him oxen or something, so the piece of land. You have to give him things to start his new life. You can't just cut the umbilical cord and say, have a nice life. You have to give him things so that he can start his life anew. Okay, and he says after that to remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. In 16:12, it says it's talking about when you celebrate, everyone must be included in the celebration. So there's lots of festivals and commandments to celebrate in Deuteronomy and the other books of the law. And it specifically says at those times, you can't just, it's not just time for the people that are rich or the people that are actually have enough money to celebrate. Everybody has to be included in your celebration. The foreigner in your gates, everybody is included. When we celebrate, we all celebrate. You can't just have your own private parties. When celebration time is, you're supposed to include everybody who's living among you. Okay, the third one, actually I guess it'd be the fourth one, is in 24:18. Deuteronomy 24:18. And this one is, you cannot show partiality when you're dealing out justice or punishment. Okay, so you can't treat the foreigner, the orphan, the widow differently than you would treat your neighbor who you have a good relationship with. And when justice comes down, you got to treat everybody. Everybody's on the same planes. Everybody's on the same scale, the same level. And you can't treat one person differently than another when you're dealing out justice or punishment. Okay. And the last one, 24:22, it says, you must leave food in your fields so the poor and helpless can go out by and gather it. So when you have a field and you're harvesting and you drop something, you can't go back and pick it up. That's for the poor people. And you can't harvest the corners of your field. Those are for poor and less fortunate people, and so they can survive. And so after every one of these commands, God says you got to remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. So what are all these commands? Because he doesn't actually say this after every command. Your father and mother. He doesn't say remember that you were slave in the land of Egypt. So it's only these specific commands. And what do these specific commands have to do or with each other? What's the common theme here? It says, I believe that each command has to do with people. So each command is, again, it's not talking about worshiping idols. Each one of these has to do with a certain type of people. And what kind of people? Well, you'll see slaves, servants, aliens or foreigners, widows, and orphans. These are the people that they mention. And what do these people have in common? So, slaves, servants, aliens, foreigners, widows, and orphans. What's the common thing among these people? I think that they're people that are outside the traditional community. Okay, you have a stable community where there's families and there's a way for people to grow up and be ushered into the community, and there's laws, or I would say there's customs and things like that, where we kind of know what to do and how to deal with each other and what time to do things, and that's just what culture is. That's kind of just telling us how to get to maturity. But these are people that are kind of outside of this culture. They're not really part of the major flow of culture. And they need help to be brought into the culture. And I think that that's the bottom line there. And I'll just turn this page here. In Myanmar, it's quite difficult because you can see that if a person were to accept Christ, they're kind of thrown out of the mainstream of culture, and so and we have in America we value independence and self-sustaining things and self-sustainability. And we think that everybody, we live in a land of opportunity, and you can make something of yourself if you really try, and if you're not making something of yourself, you're probably lazy. Obviously, that's not everybody's thinking, but there is this kind of idea that we need to stand alone and do it ourselves. Most of the world's not like this. Most of the world, you have huge communities that are totally dependent on each other. And so your family is your retirement, your family is everything. Your family is your hope of education, your family is hope of getting a job. Everything you know is caught up into that community. And if you're outside the community, it's impossible to break in. And if you're thrown outside the community, it's even worse for you because you're kind of, I guess would be excommunicated type things. And so people, when they accept Christianity in Myanmar, they're kind of taken outside of the major community. So when you converted to Christianity, you didn't lose your job. You didn't you might have had some family problems, but usually it doesn't get too bad. There, it's kind of just you're done. Sometimes it's not the case, but most of the time it is. So in Israel at that time, again, there's communal life and there's people that are kind of on the outskirts, and that they don't have those support systems. Orphans and widows aren't going to have those support system. People that are slaves or servants, there's a reason why that they were slaves and hard to get back up on their feet and be part of the major stream of the community. So these people in the book of Deuteronomy are outside of the community already, not the Israelites per se, but these orphans and widows and foreigners. And what God says is no. I want them inside the community of God. I want them inside the community of God, and you must bring them in. Okay? He's really talking about them bringing them in. You gotta make sure you include these people in the festival. You can't just be having a good time eating your corn dog. You have to make sure that everybody else has a corn dog. You they didn't have corn dogs, but you get the idea. He's not saying that I'm just going to provide for them. No, it's like you're responsible. You got to bring them inside the community. So what's the deal? Why remember slavery? Why can't you just say, love your neighbor yourself? Be helpful. Be a generally nice person. What's this command? Remembering that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. If you do not remember what it is like when you were outside the community, you will not be able to empathize with the people who are outside the community. Over time, you will stop even seeing them, and they will be continually pushed to the outsides of the community of God. And what happens if you don't remember the time when you were outside of the community. Your natural thinking is everybody's fine. Everybody I know is fine. Every person I see seems to be doing all right. But the reality is that you just stop seeing the people that are outside the community of God. So if these people are not in your fields and at your festivals, you will forget that they are an everyday reality. If you have forgotten your pain, then you will assume that others' pain is less painful. Okay? I had a root canal, and then I had another one about 5 years ago, and I'd forgotten how painful it was. I was like, oh, I'll get to sit in the dentist chair, and I'll get some nice Novocaine, and about halfway through the root canal, I was like, what was I thinking? This was really, really painful. But again, the time had passed, and I'd forgotten how painful the pain was. And when you're outside the community, you do feel pain. You do feel like you're an outsider. I've been in churches where, again, I just feel like I'm the odd one. Nobody really is talking to me and things like that. And it's a constant pain. And if you don't remember that, then you won't be able to sympathize, and you won't try to bring that person in. Well, they look fine. They're not saying anything, but I'm sure they're fine. Another problem is that this command was given not for the time that they're at, because they're in the desert right now. So the command is kind of forthtelling. It's talking about when you're in the land, because they don't have fields at this point. They're not organizing the festival. They're looking about the time when you're in the land, you're prospering, you're doing well. You got to remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. And so this command is given when they are going to be prospering in the land. And it's amazing that when people are doing well, somehow they get the idea that they've achieved it by themselves. Okay? And I've definitely been in that category where I feel like I've done a good job. You know, I've been able to provide for my family, and somehow I forget that I didn't do it all myself. You know. Definitely, I think that in America we have a problem with that, because we do have this self-sustaining idea, and we don't think that, okay, I have a good job and I provided for myself and I provided for my family. Well, you're not the one that created a community in which there is a job. You didn't probably start your own business. You probably are working for somebody else, maybe at a broom factory. I don't know. But again, the things that are around you that are helping you to support yourself, you did not create, and you did not put together. You didn't create a stable currency. These things are all given to you. These are our heritage from people who have worked very hard, and basically from God. People have followed the principles of God and have enabled us to have those things. So I think that if you keep in mind that there was a time when you were worse off, when things were really bad, if you remember the times of slavery, and I'm going to get to what that is, and when you remember the lands of slavery, you will be able to have compassion on those outside the community, and you will be able to bring those in. I believe that that's the connection that God is making here, that there's a remembering, and then there's an action that helps, is helped by the remembering. So what's the modern application? As I was studying this, there's so many applications, and I had a really hard time kind of just bringing it down to something simple. So if you read this and you get other application, you will, because I've got thousands of ideas about how this can apply to our lives. But I'm just going to bring it down to a couple ways that this could apply in our lives today. The first one is there are certainly, and I think this is the easiest one, there's certainly people outside the community of God in this community. That there are people that, for whatever reason, they're not here today because they don't value what's happening here, and they don't think that this is going to help their lives. And God says, no, we need to bring those people into the community. And that I think, is the easiest way for you to interpret this passage. And I was very encouraged by just the announcements this morning. Were you encouraged by the announcements? I was. It's like, wow, you guys got a food pantry going on. You're getting in the parade, doing those things like that. That's exactly what I would encourage you to do, and more of it is a ways for you to get the community in here, where you can bring the community in, taking care widows and orphans, people that, again, are not doing so well. Again, that's what God is talking about here. So you're doing well there. Okay. The other application that I see is just people who don't fit in the church. So they're coming to church right now, but they don't seem to be in the major flow of things. They're kind of on the outskirts. And we were all in school, the high school, right? And there's these people that kind of just don't fit in, and they never fit in, right? From first day of freshman to graduation, they're just kind of oddballs, and nobody wants to hang out with them. And these people in our churches, they are absolutely in our churches, and who knows why they don't fit in. I think it's more or less, it's good for us, but I won't spend a lot of time on that. But there are people in our churches, and I hear pastors, I talk to a lot of pastors, of course, talking about the strange people that come into their congregation. And every community is full of them. But we need to bring them in, okay? We need to bring them into the flow of the community of God, and not just be happy that they're here and they're hearing about God's word. They need to be brought close. And I know there's some people that are very difficult to love and very difficult, but it's our responsibility. And if we remember our slavery, we'll be able to do that. And I'm going to get to that. And the last application is interesting, because right now we're not Israel. We don't have a state where we rule things. And so we have a church age, which is a little bit different. So how does this apply? Because Christians are in small communities, but there's not too many Christian communities like we would see Israel would be, like one community with one worship thing. It's different nowadays in the church age. But I think the last thing is talking about missional and being missionaries, going out into these other cultures and bringing them in. So when we were talking about this morning in Sunday school, the commands and acts, going to the ends of the earth, Jerusalem, Judea, and the ends of the earth. And it's our responsibility as a church body to find people in other cultures and bring them into the community of God. Not here in church, but if you want to give me the next slide here, this is what my friend calls the red zone. This is basically where most communities in the red part don't have a church. Most of these communities don't. The people that live in this red part of the world, they don't have. They don't know a Christian. They probably never seen a Bible. And again, they don't know about God. And if we don't remember that there are people like this, then we might be tempted to think that everything's going along the way it should be going on. And let me tell you, it's not. The world there is a very terrible place. Most people don't want to live anywhere in that red area. If you know what kind of places, we're talking about Sahara Desert, North Africa. You got all the Middle East in that area, Mongolia. These are places that are very tough to live, and it's because they've been without God for such a long time. And so here's my point: is that Christ said is that those who practice sin are slaves to sin. And people that are caught up in their own sin and have not repented, not been regenerated, are in a slavery. Okay, they're in a slavery to themselves, their own desires, the way their culture has told them to behave, and it's self-destructive and it's hurtful. And there's people in the community, your community right now, that are like that, and there's people all over that red area that are without God. And I asked you at the beginning who was raised in church, and there are some that were raised in church. But for some of you guys that came into God, you can remember a lifestyle that came to God maybe in midlife, or you remember, I grew up in church. I didn't do anything real crazy. I didn't party. All these stories, drugs. I don't know anything about that. I was never there. Didn't do it. So I don't have that testimony to look back on where I was deep in the slavery of my own sin. But some of you probably do. Some of you had some pretty rough times, and it brought you to God. Some of you grew up in the church like me, and for those of you who did, you have experienced slavery. Okay, Growing up, I think about the worst times in my life. If I had to categorize the times when I just wanted to die, that they were just, I was so embarrassed or I was so hurt. They're always, every one of those situations I was in is either due to my own sin or somebody else's sin. Somebody else had sinned against me, or maybe I was caught in my own sin and I was just embarrassed. And if I can remember that time when I was feeling the weight of my own sin, I think that enables us to have compassion on those who are surrounded in sin, who are in slavery to themselves. And I'm sorry. The people in your community who are without God, they're not fine, and they are in a kind of slavery that is much worse than a physical slavery. You don't need to go to them because you have the right answers, but because they need it. It's not a pride thing. It's inviting them to the church. It's not saying that you're right and they're wrong. It's they need God. And I work in a community in Myanmar where all of them, I don't wonder if they go to church or not. I don't have to ask. I know that they're all stuck in slavery to their sin and the culture that pushes this on them. So I want to encourage you today to remember your own sin and how it destroyed your life. And that will empower you to go out and rescue others. A young Abraham Lincoln lived in Illinois all his life. Illinois is a free state. There was no slavery. And he'd never seen slavery. And I don't remember how old he was, but he took a trip down to New Orleans on a flat boat down the river and doing some sort of job. I don't remember what it was. And he got to see slavery for the first time. And I mean, confronted with something awful like that, you know, the people down south had gotten desensitized to it. This is just normal life, you know. They were not shocked to see slaves in their community, but he was. So I hope today shocks you that there are these places in the world that are just full of slaves. So when he saw these, when Abraham Lincoln saw these slaves, he's reported to be saying, one of his friends said that let me find the exact quote. He said, "If I ever get a chance to hit that thing, I will hit it hard." Today, I hope you've taken a trip down the river with me to see slavery in our world today, and slave-rich sin I'm talking about. So I'm asking you today, how hard will you hit it? With God's help, Moses brought out about 2 million people out of slavery into the Promised Land. With God's help, Abraham Lincoln freed about 3 million slaves. God can use you to save people from their own sin, save people from the slavery of their heart. As the world sits today, there's 4,700 million people that need to be brought out of slavery. And I don't want to tell you that it's hopeless, because it's not. It's certainly not hopeless. But if we remember our sin and we remember the pain and suffering that sin causes, we'll be able to minister in an appropriate way to those outside the community and bring them into the community of God. Because it's certainly possible. God does amazing things when we work together. And I'm so happy for your pastor bringing us in here, talking about it, missions, because you guys can be a part of something that's so much bigger than just the four walls of this church and just the community that you live in. That you can have a global impact through missions, through short-term missions, through all sorts of different avenues. Definitely reach your community, but there's more that we can do. You know, we are responsible for our earth. We're responsible for people who don't have a community of God that they can come to. In our communities, when people are hurting, they can come here. They know that the church is going to help. They know that they can get things from the church. But in the community where I live, they don't know that. They don't have a church, and they don't know where to run to. And we can't let that go on. So I want to encourage you here to bring people into your community, but then also see the world as a place that needs God and needs help. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Do you want me to just close? Do you want me to pray? You want to close? Thank you. Thank you.
Allison, if you come up there when it stands, Pete, if you could come up, I'd like to pray for Mark and Allison. God would protect them and get them back over as soon as possible, and all. Experience that a little bit in our own lives, aren't we?
Mm.
It's hard to get the gospel net out there and get people. So let's pray for the Spirit on these.
Thank you.
And then afterwards, let's just say we'll go out, see you guys back there. Yes, the offering, they're back doors. Thank you.
Lord, as we stand here before this young couple, Father, what a tremendous thing it is to do something like this. To have the courage to go out and speak your word in other countries and not knowing what's going to happen the next day. We pray for both of them that you'll guard over them and keep them safe. Father, and you know it's a tremendous burden for financial needs, Father. And we ask, Father, you'll meet their needs, whatever it might be. And they're about to have a young one when we pray, Father, for this baby when it comes into this world, that it will be blessed and they'll be blessed with the baby.
Thank you, Jesus.
And we just ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.